All right. Welcome everyone to our June demo day. It's hard to believe we're halfway through 2025, but here we are. So today we'll have Alex kick things off with demos of a couple new features and some things that are in flight still. So I'll hand it over to Alex.
Okay. Yep. So some of the stuff that we'll be showing is related to settings and MRK control. So I just wanted to shout out a lot of work that Andrew did to kind of update the UI here and clean things up. So no longer do we have a massive field of checkboxes just on one tab here for point of sale. We now have specific categories and everything's broken down into some nice sections here. So I mean, makes it way easier to understand, keeps things really organized. And it's a very nice change. Um, and so to touch on some of those settings, so for a little while we've had this ability to update and manage the search results via a lookup for the point of sale customer search. We now also have this option to use that same lookup to display your recently viewed. So it gives you kind of a consistent view between the two tabs now. So here we can see the search results that are a lookup. We hop over here. You can see you've got the same columns, same formatting. So that's good, just keeps things consistent. One thing to note here is that if you want to use a lookup for this to support recently viewed, the lookup does need to have an additional ability to accept the ID, the customer ID, because that's kind of what we're getting is we're sending in the list of IDs and fetching this data back. And so that actually has some other benefits too. I think some of us have experienced if we're logging into different sites with the same website, the same Zoom Assist Labs or Rover ERP, you can end up getting customers for different clients all showing up in one table, and some of them just don't work. But since this is phoning home to get the data now, you're not gonna see those extraneous results. And then proceeding on, go to invoices section, and we're going to find an outstanding invoice. Go to payment. And so when handling cash payments that exceeded the invoice balance, you get this field to apply overage to account, or in this case, since it's unchecked, to return change. Previously, this was always defaulted to checked. This is now controllable in MRK control. Hereby, this default apply cash overage to account. So whatever this setting is, that will be the default that you get here. So that kind of lets you have a little more control there. Just to note, this only applies to cash payments, check, credit. Those do not honor this. Those are always kind of hard coded to a specific setting. Moving on to inventory, we have another lookup. So in INV control, we now have this transactions lookup that you can select. And this drives this transaction tab. And so one of the things here was this table originally would try to fetch everything that was applicable. So you could get thousands of results, and it could be kind of slow and kind of unmanageable. And sorting and filtering was happening on the front end. But if you opt for a lookup, you can see we'll page through for about 100 results, and then it's going to ask for more. And so things should be a lot snappier. Things should work better. And now you've got some additional customizability here on what you're seeing. Finally, along the same lines as in MR, is in point of sale, we now have the option to drive the customer inquiry search results via a lookup. So in this case, we're using the same one as point of sale. Kind of gives us a consistent look between the two, but if you want the two to differ now, you've also got that option so that you can have different search results here. And likewise, the recently viewed works the exact same way. So we've got this additional checkbox that you can turn on, and it'll use that matching lookup to display your results here. So keeping things consistent, giving some more customizability at the same time. And I believe those should be all of the items I had planned for.
All right. Thank you, Alex. So I think we'll hand it over to Christian, if you're ready, Christian, to show cash deposits.
Let me share my screen. Okay, so one of the new features we've added in point of sale is the ability to pay for orders using cash deposit. So now when you select an order, you could see one of the options now is cash deposit. So I'll click that. And this is driven by a new MRK control flag within the POS select custom tab. It's POS allow cash deposit. So you'll need both this to be enabled to get that to work. Oh, that one does not have an item. Mistake, sorry. Let's do this one. Okay, so now you could do a cash deposit. So we'll add this amount. And then you'll see that it says submit deposit. So you can go ahead and click that. And then it'll make the AI record. So this one is 6475. And this is very similar to Rover's cash.e7 form that would produce this result. And so this is just one feature that's been requested and should be available in the next release.
Okay, thank you, Christian. So I will take over the screen share and show
Looks
a
like
couple
Susie has
other-
a question real quick.
Oh, yep. Go ahead, Susie. Sorry.
Hi, on the cash deposit, so that doesn't pay for the invoice, or I guess how is that recorded? I'm sorry, it seems a little weird. Isn't it just a cash payment? Or is it actually paid against the invoice?
Christian, do you want to pull up that cash item? I think it does an OA entry. So it's to be applied to that invoice. But
Okay, so it goes, so kind of just puts it on the account and then the accounting people can apply it to the invoice, basically?
I
And
believe that's correct. Andrew, you want to chime in?
yeah, so it's identical to the desktop version of Cash E7. So it is making a cash record, and there is a field in our cash dictionary to allow for a sales order number. And what happens is, let's say I've got a $500 invoice, and it's like, hey, you've got to pay $100 of this up front before I start ordering all these non-stock parts. You take that cash payment, right? You're telling it, hey, this applies to SO1234. Now we have that. It's on an on account or kind of like a credit until we start invoicing, right? So we actually ship part of the order, all of the order. At time of posting for that shipment, it's going to go, oh, hey, we've got this cash payment that applies to this. Let's add that to this. And then on the accounting side, you only need to collect the remainder of the invoice. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, and then I would assume that the invoice itself would then reflect that the deposit was paid on it if you were to generate that for the customer?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Susie, are you ever taking or soliciting customers to make a payment before you've run ship.e, ship.e2, right? Process the shipment there to create the invoice, or are you
Right.
always doing collections activity after the invoice is in hand?
Most of the time it's after the fact, but we do, like when we're ordering hardware, one of our, goals is to, have them pay up front. So that could be helpful. Definitely.
Yeah, this would
Yeah.
create the opportunity to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right, Bonnie, you have a question?
Oh, I just was saying that there's a prepaid checkbox in SO.E that does the same thing, but with a credit card. Of course, it's not web, but it should result in the same thing as Cash E7.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions to this point? All right, I will share my screen and show a couple other new features here. So a couple things in play here. There's a new, so when you're clicking on the part option, the part details within a quote, and a part has related parts defined via part options, there's now an option to have those option groups collapsed by default. So that's in MRK control. There's a new POS collapse part option groups. If that is checked, when you bring up the part detail, the sections will be collapsed by default. And then expanding on that, you'll see the order of these. We have also purchased at the top. We added the ability to change the order. So if I want to change the order, I can go into the part detail for that item. And then in the related parts section, there's now a sort icon to the left of the option group dropdown. So if I click on that, I can just drag and drop these to reorder them. If I save, then that change is reflected here. Also purchased is on the bottom. Option group 10 is the second to last. And then if I go back and I look at the part detail for that, it will reflect that new order. So that just gives a little more flexibility in how this is displaying. That sort order works for the nested option groups as well. So if you expand an option group that has nested option groups below it, you can reorder things within the nested sections as well. Okay, so that will be in the next release. And then another item that we're starting to work on is the ability to update the cart quantities from that same part detail display. That will be a toggle. The toggle has not been added to MRK control yet. So in this demo, I just have that hard coded to true. So in this case, I have a cart started and I have some items in the cart. If I go into the detail, you can see that for items that are in the cart, the button is now update cart rather than add to cart. And the current quantity in the cart is reflected there. And you'll notice when I hovered over, it tells me that the total quantity of this part is 25. This particular part number is in two different option groups. So it's in here as a quantity of 2, and then it's also in the related parts. It's a quantity of 23. So if I were to change this quantity and hit update cart, it will update the quantity in the cart, and then that hover will reflect the total quantity of the part across all option groups within this current quote. So again, that'll be a toggleable option. If you want to be able to update quantities from the part detail, you can. Otherwise, it would revert back to add to cart if that's not enabled. Any questions? All right. Well, if there's no questions, I think this will be a fairly short update for this month.
I want to go back to John's question real quick here from chat.
Sure.
So the idea attaching a copy of the check to the invoice just as proof. Really, so John, fair to say you'd be doing that as kind of a rudimentary substitute to processing the check using the system, as more of like, here's my evidence trail of the check that I processed associated with this payment, but I'm still having to go deposit the check at the bank some other way, basically.
Right.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of conversations right now with the vendor called iStream that does payment processing stuff, especially on the check side. And the discussion there is around bringing check scanning into the application through an integrated solution. They've got a software solution for check scanning and processing, which would go gangbusters for what we're talking about, I think. And then they also do have hardware check scanning options for integrations that you might have where we don't want to be beholden to whatever customer's bank's check scanner is that they've got sitting there. We want them on some more consistent hardware that's associated with the device that's doing the scanning. So literally, right before this call, I was on with them for 30 minutes talking to their technical lead, but Quelo and I are down a path with them on the financial side for us to set up to resell their service to our customers. So I think highly likely you see us just jumping straight to that as a solution here when people are processing checks, and we just bypass the notion of attaching an image of the check into the system that's not really had anything happen to it outside of any manual touch outside of the system. Do you think that would be exciting to anybody?
Sounds pretty cool to me.
Yeah. Do you have any customers that have been asking on this, or is this just
Yes.
something you had identified in the process?
Renova, she's mentioned that, and she's on a Mac, so generally her main touch point is web for her functions, and this would avoid her having to go over to a PC somewhere else at someone's desk and doing it. And that was there's a whole thing behind that.
Absolutely. Do you know what kind of volume they're doing, and are they set up yet for on the Rover Pay side for credit card and ACH? Like what's their kind of, and we can also maybe let's do that. We'll put a pin in that discussion. I'll hit you up after the call and we can talk specifics for them offline, but there's maybe some very real opportunity there.
All right, super.
I think what we're looking to do here too on this time is, similar to weekly achievement, create some space too for celebrations on the AI side. So if anybody has anything they want to talk about there, great opportunity. I want to give you just a sneak peek of what's liable to be coming into production very quickly. I won't get into the why of doing it this way, but Bill had a very great idea yesterday on using the enhancements to web control in the desktop that allow you to inject embedded pages into the application, which we were predominantly doing to link in dashboards. You can also do that to link in assistants, GPTs, all kinds of things, basically. Anything that would render out and be functional in an embedded frame within a web page. So, you love the questions here. This was the first thing we were talking about, Corey and I and Mike and the team was like, yeah, how do you make sure if this support assistant is really publicly accessible that it's not going to give people bad intel? So you could say, it's not going to tell me how to cook meth. It's not going to tell me how to build a bomb. But like, tell me about test.e. If I was being more clever here, I would have referenced a form that we were just talking about earlier in the system. But this thing, from a knowledge perspective, this thing doesn't have access to the nuclear codes. It just has access to the public documentation we already have exposed at docs.zoomassist.com. Many of you have already played with this, logging into, yeah, thank you, John. Go jailbreak it, please. All right, notice, so many of you have been playing with this using Zoom Assist Labs, reports.zoomassist labs. You go log in there, get into the assistant, or go into the dev version if you want to ask questions about source code. But as a way to evaluate how good of a job it does at searching the docs and providing the right answer based off the docs. So you don't have to do that anymore. You can go log into the dev deployment of Rover, my.zoomassistlabs.com, and you'll see it available under the dashboards page at the moment, but as the support assistant tab. Jake, but you can just step away from the stove for a minute, but yeah, so this I think is really cool as a way to get some of the neat things that have happened over into this space very quickly. And please, by all means, try to jailbreak it, play around with stuff over here. But because web control is a default thing, it's highly likely that you'll see us leverage this as a way to get the support assistant then into the web interface for everybody in short order without having to go down the path of enabling the full AI assistant. There's more nuance in that conversation about keeping some level of separation there. If anybody's curious as to the why, I'm happy to dig into that with you. But just keep in mind, kudos to Shoshana for the upgrades a couple of months ago at this point to web control to allow dynamic embeddings within the web from the desktop. That was a customer project that we stretched a little bit to do a bit more with. And kudos to Bill. Like, it's such a good idea yesterday. I was telling Corey and the team, like, I'm mad I didn't come up with that myself. Like, it's a great way to use what we have in the system and marry more things together here. So check it out on the dev site. If you hadn't already been playing around with the support assistant through the dev Rover BI system. Again, this doesn't have any information other than what is at docs.zoomassist.com, and the stuff that is there is just all the old Rover documentation from the HTML pages, plus Smart Suite and some POS Connect stuff. And of course, a few new things that have now been sprinkled in as we've gotten to people to start updating the docs. But pretty cool stuff, I think.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Does anyone have anything else? All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Have a good day.